Tonight is the night I'll have you to myself.
Chief, I'm unclean at the moment. It just started.
Unclean! How dare you!
Nobody warned Julie that the morning her mother died would be the last peaceful morning of her life. She was 12 years old when it happened. Her mother, a quiet and gentle woman named Beatrice, had been sick for months. The family had spent everything on hospital visits, on prayers, on hope. But hope ran out before the medicine did. The funeral was small. The tears were not large. Julie stood at the graveside holding her father's hand so tightly she could feel his knuckles shake. His name was Jude, a man who had once been strong, once laughed loudly, and once danced at weddings. But grief has a way of folding a man in half. After Beatrice died, Jude became a shadow of himself, quiet, lost, easily led. And that was when the vultures came. Her name was Loretta. She arrived 6 months after the burial, bringing food, bringing smiles, bringing soft words for a broken man. She wore her kindness like a costume, perfectly fitted for the audience she needed to fool. Within a year, she was Julie's stepmother. Within 2 years, she had given Jude a son of her own, and within 3 years, she had decided that Julie needed to disappear. By the time Julie turned 19, her father had lost his job at the factory. The economy was cruel that year. Bills piled up like stones. The house that had once smelled of her mother's cooking now smelled like desperation. Loretta was patient. She had been waiting for exactly this moment. One evening, while Julie was washing dishes in the kitchen, she heard her stepmother's voice floating through the thin wall of her parents' bedroom. Low, calculated, sweet like fruit left too long in the sun. Jude, I am not saying anything bad. I am only thinking about our family, about our son. Chief Akachuku has been asking about Julie for months. He is a wealthy man. She will live in a big compound. She will eat well. Is that not better than watching her suffer here with us? Julie's hands went still in the soapy water. She heard her father's voice, weak and uncertain. Julie, she's my daughter, Loretta. And she's a burden we cannot carry right now. A pause, then softer, almost tender. Do you want our son to grow up in poverty? Do you want to watch us starve? Julie is young and beautiful. This is a blessing from God, not a punishment. Julie did not sleep that night. She told herself her father would never agree. He loved her. She was sure of it. She held on to that sureness like a rope over dark water. She did not yet know that the rope had already been cut. Chief Akachuku was 61 years old. He had 3 wives already. He was known across the region, not for kindness, but for power. Men lowered their eyes when he walked past. Women crossed to the other side of the road. He had money, he had land. He had influence that reached into places where ordinary people could never knock. And he wanted Julie. He always wanted them young, no matter what it takes. When her father called her into the sitting room one Sunday afternoon, Julie noticed that Loretta was sitting in the corner with a small smile that never quite reached her eyes. She noticed that her father could not look directly at her face. She noticed that his hands were trembling. She knew before he even opened his mouth. "My daughter," Jude began, his voice cracking like old wood. "Chief Akachuku is a good man. He will take care of you. You will lack nothing. Papa," her voice was so quiet it almost wasn't there. "Papa, please don't do this." She watched his eyes fill with tears. She watched him blink them away. She watched the man she loved most in the world choose his new family over her. Not with cruelty, but with cowardice. And somehow, that was worse. He signed the agreement 3 days later. Julie cried until her body had nothing left to cry with. Then she made a decision. She was not going to that compound without a fight. The first time she ran, she made it 3 villages away before the chief's men found her on the road. They did not touch her. They did not need to. They simply stood in front of her, large, silent, immovable, and said, "Come." She came. The second time, she hid in the back of a truck heading toward the city. She made it further that time, almost to the motor park. She had a small bag, she had a plan, she had hope. But someone had seen her leave. Someone had made a phone call. They brought her back before sunset. The third time, she did not run to the road. She went to people instead, neighbors, distant relatives, anyone who might listen. She knocked on doors with tears on her face and told them what was happening. She begged, she pleaded, she showed them the truth written plainly on her young face. Door after door, people looked at her with sorry eyes and closed expressions. Chief Akachukwu is a powerful man. We cannot get involved. God will help you. Nobody helped her. The wedding happened on a Thursday. The sky was grey. There was no music in Julie's heart, only a hollow, echoing silence that she was terrified would last forever. She entered Chief Akachukwu's compound wearing white. She felt like she was being buried alive. But Julie had not given up. She had only changed tactics. In the small pocket of her wrapper, she had hidden something, a tiny blade, just big enough to save her. She had a plan. Not an escape plan this time, a survival plan. On the first night, when Chief Akachukwu came to her room, with expectation in his eyes, Julie met him with calm she did not feel. He came close. She winced and whispered, "My lord, I beg you, I am unclean tonight. It is my time." She had made a small, careful cut on her arm beneath her sleeve, which made the stain visible enough as if it were real. Chief Akachukwu recoiled with disgust and left without a word. She breathed. The second time he came, a messenger arrived at the compound just as the chief was approaching her door. An urgent village matter. A land disputer could not wait. The chief cursed under his breath and disappeared into the night. Julie sat on the edge of her bed and looked up at the ceiling. Was that a coincidence? Or was something watching over her? The third time, an political emergency swallowed the entire compound in noise and chaos. Men rushing in and out, phone calls at midnight. The chief had no time for her. Weeks passed, then a month. Every single time, something happened. The other wives watched her with a mix of suspicion and quiet awe. One of them, an older woman named Mama Odo, who had been in the compound for 15 years, pulled Julie aside one afternoon and whispered, "Whatever you are doing, child, keep doing it and keep praying." Julie prayed harder than she had ever prayed in her life. Nobody told Julie that Chief Akachukwu had a son from his first wife. Nobody thought it was important. His name was David. He had been abroad for 4 years, studying, working, and building a life far from his father's world. He returned on a Tuesday evening with a single suitcase and tired eyes. He did not know what was waiting for him inside that compound. When David walked in and saw the situation, a girl barely older than 20, clearly terrified, clearly trapped, the blood drained from his face. He went straight to his father. The argument that followed shook the walls. "Father, how many times must I come home to find another young woman imprisoned in this house? This has to stop. It has to stop now." The chief did not raise his voice. Powerful men rarely need to. "You have been away too long," he said quietly. "This is not your business." "She is a human being." "She is my wife. This conversation is over." David left the room with rage burning behind his eyes, but he was not finished. He found Julie in the back courtyard the next morning, hanging laundry with eyes that had forgotten what it felt like to hope. He introduced himself. He apologized, not on his father's behalf, because he refused to carry that shame, but because no one else had thought to say sorry to her. "I will not pretend I can fix everything," he told her, his voice low, "but I will make sure you are not alone in this house. I promise you that." Julie stared at him for a long moment, trying to find the trick in his words. She had learned by now that kindness from strangers usually came with a hidden cost, but David's eyes were steady, open, clean. She gave him the smallest nod she had, and something very small, cracked open in the wall she had built around herself. 3 weeks after David returned, Chief Akachukwu made his announcement at dinner. He looked across the table with flat, final eyes and said, "No more delays. Tonight is the night. I have been patient long enough." The table went silent. Mama Udo's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. David's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Julie felt the air leave the room. She excused herself quietly and went to her room. She sat on her bed and clasped her hands together so hard her knuckles turned pale. She had no plan left, no tricks remaining, no more coincidences she could manufacture. This time felt different, final. She could hear footsteps in the corridor, slow, deliberate, coming closer. She closed her eyes and prayed the only prayer she had left. It was not even words. It was just her name, offered up like a surrender into hands she could not see. The footsteps stopped outside her door. There was a pause. Then a crash. Loud, sudden, wrong. Something heavy hitting the floor, a choking sound, then shouting from the corridor, voices climbing over each other, feet running. Julie opened her door. The chief was on the floor. He was alive, but barely, his face twisted in pain, one hand pressed to his chest, his breath coming in rough, desperate pulls. His men were already shouting for a car. Mama Udo was on her knees beside him, her voice high and frightened. They rushed him to the hospital that night. By morning, Chief Akachukwu was gone. Massive heart attack, the doctor said. He must have been carrying it for years. A quiet bomb inside him, waiting. Julie sat in the corner of the compound long after everyone else had moved. She did not weep for him. She was not sure she had that right. But she wept for herself, for everything she had survived, for every night she had held herself together with trembling hands, for every prayer she had sent up into the dark with no guarantee anything was listening. Something had been listening. Within days of the chief's death, Loretta appeared at the compound like a bad dream that refused to end. She arrived dressed in mourning clothes with her eyes already calculating. She wanted her share of the chief's wealth, payment for delivering Julie, she said, as though a daughter were a product with a receipt. But Chief Akachukwu's estate was complicated. Lawyers arrived, documents were reviewed, and one thing became very clear very quickly. Because the marriage had never been fully consummated, because the agreement had been informal and undocumented in the ways that mattered legally, Loretta's claim was built on nothing. Her plans collapsed like wet paper. Julie watched her stepmother leave the compound with empty hands and watched the compound gate close behind her. She felt something released in her chest. Not triumph, not revenge, just relief, like a knot finally letting go. It was her father she was not sure about. Jude arrived 2 days later. He was thinner than she remembered. He stood at the gate for several minutes before asking if he could come in. His shoulders were bent, his eyes were destroyed. When Julie came to the courtyard to meet him, he could not look at her face. He sat on a low stool with his hands hanging between his knees, and he said nothing for a long time. Then, "Julie, my daughter, I am sorry." The words were too small for what he had done. Both of them knew it. But Julie looked at this broken old man who once held her hand at her mother's graveside, this man who had been weak when she needed him to be strong, and she understood something quietly devastating. He had suffered too, not as she had suffered, not even close, but he had lived every day since with the weight of what he allowed. That was its own prison. She did not throw her arms around him, but she sat down beside him, and for now, that was enough. In the months that followed, David helped Julie in the most practical way he could. He asked her what she wanted. Nobody had ever asked her that before, not once. Her mother had died before she was old enough to have real wants. Her father had been too weak to honor them. The world had been too loud to hear them. "What do you want, Julie?" She thought about it for 3 whole days before she answered. Then she told him she wanted to go back to school. She had stopped in her 2nd year of university when her family's money ran out. She wanted to finish what she started. She wanted to be something. Not someone's wife, not someone's property, not someone's plan. Something of her own choosing. David arranged it. He did not do it to impress her. He did not do it to create a debt she would feel obliged to repay. He did it simply because she had asked and he had the means to help, and he believed she deserved it. That was the thing about David that undid her slowly, quietly, the way dawn undoes darkness, not all at once, but inch by inch until you looked up and everything was different. She finished her degree. She started a small business, fabric and design, work that let her hands create things instead of endure things. She found laughter again, buried somewhere underneath all that grief, still alive. She and David talked often, about everything, about his life abroad, about her dreams, and about the difficult and beautiful country they both called home. They argued sometimes too, and found that their arguments were interesting, that neither of them collapsed under the other's disagreement, and that they were genuinely curious about each other's minds. Love, when it comes honestly, is quiet at first. It does not announce itself. It simply appears one morning woven already into the fabric of your ordinary days, and you realize you cannot remember a time before it. David realized it first. He said nothing for months, afraid of frightening her, afraid of the shadow his father's name still cast between them. Julie realized it second. She said nothing for weeks, afraid of trusting something good, afraid of giving her heart somewhere and watching it returned broken. Then, one evening, walking through the market near her school, David reached over and took her hand. Not as a question, as a fact. She looked at their hands, his large and steady, hers smaller and still learning to stop flinching, and she felt something she had nearly forgotten existed. She felt safe. They married 2 years later, not in a rush, not under pressure, not for money or survival or someone else's plan. Julie chose her own dress. She chose her own flowers. She chose the man standing at the end of the aisle, not because the world had forced her, but because she had looked at the full inventory of her heart and found his name written there in her own hand. Her father walked her down the aisle. He had not been forgiving completely. Some wounds take longer than a season to heal, but he was there. That was what she had chosen to give him, presence, a chance to witness the daughter he had nearly destroyed becoming whole. When the pastor asked if she took this man of her own free will, Julie smiled the first full smile anyone had seen on her face in years. "I do," she said, and meant every syllable. At the reception, Jude sat quietly at a table near the back. He did not dance, he did not make speeches. He simply watched his daughter laugh, really laugh with her whole body, the way she used to when her mother was alive, and he pressed 2 fingers to his mouth and closed his eyes. He was not crying because he had lost a daughter. He was crying because he had nearly lost her forever, and by some grace he did not deserve, she was still here, still standing, still his. Some storms last years. Some prisons have no bars. Some fathers fail their daughters in ways that cannot be undone, only survived, only outlasted, only eventually, painfully, imperfectly forgiven. And some girls, sold, silenced, nearly broken, discover somewhere in the rubble of everything done to them a self so stubborn and so luminous that not even the worst of men could extinguish it. Julie was one of those girls, and she had spent enough time in the dark. It was finally, irreversibly, time for her light. Thanks for listening and watching. Let's know your thoughts about this story in the comment section. Subscribe, like, and share. See you in the next video.